Did you know that you can take your airplane to a self service gas station just like you take your car? How about the fact that aviation fuel is often colored to be able to tell the different grades? That and many more surprises on today's Aviation Intrigue.
So is that even close to how people fuel up their airplanes? You have a fuel pump, you pull up, you fill the tank. Does it work the same way?
There's a little slot to put your credit card. You have to punch in the airplane tail number, and there are different type of gasoline. We'll talk more about that later.
And can you then go in and get a hot dog and a cup of coffee when you're done fueling up? Is that the same?
I don't think you want to do that. In fact, even in a car gas station, it says that make sure you stay next to it when you're pumping.
We get trained on a whole procedure for our pilots who learn how to fuel up by themselves via self-serve stop. You want to be close enough to the pump where you can get the gas, but not too close that you hit something with your wing. And then you have to shut down, track the airplane, and you first thing is obviously you're pulling up, taxiing with the engine running usually to the fuel pump. So you have to be very careful about where you actually have to run a grounding line.
You need to know how big your wingspan is because you don't want to be too far, but you don't want to be too close either. Talk to us a little bit more about the grounding.
You've probably seen at the gas station where if you are filling up a separate can, you're not supposed to sit inside. That is due to spark static electricity has to be prevented in order to, again, increase the safety because you do have gas fumes floating around there while you're fueling. There's a cable that you can attach to a metal part in your airplane, the exhaust pipe or part of the landing gear, to ground that airplane to avoid that safety problem.
Because static electricity, especially in a highly charged environment like in a gas station with fumes, it's not pretty. It could lead into disaster very quickly.
The aircraft, it's the same concern, just a slightly different way of handling that. And then when you are also parked at the pump, you need to make sure you're selecting the right gas.
There is jet fuel, as the name implies, is typically used in a jet, but most of us fly general aviation smaller airplanes, and we use something called Avgas or aviation gas.
So for piston airplanes, there are actually several types of aviation gas. So there's probably only two that are really common.
We have no lead in our gas powered cars, whereas airplanes still have lead. It's low lead. That's why they call it 100 low lead.
The smaller piston engine aircraft very commonly fly on 100 low lead and it's color coded. It's a little bit of a light blue dye to make sure you've got the correct one. And then usually next to that tank, there's if it has Jet A, there's clearly labeled jet fuel, which is usually clear or a little bit yellow. And some airports don't even have that if they're very small. And then there's also something called MoGas, which is essentially refined car gas that some aircraft can run on if they have older piston engines, for example.
You need to be careful putting the proper gasoline that your aircraft is certified for and what the manufacturer recommends. Let's say you have a car that regular gasoline is fine. Some cars you must have premium gasoline. It's similar.
Everyone should know what kind or kinds their aircraft engine is certified for. When you get to that fueling station, you should be very clear on the location of the fuel that you definitely want.
Bad things can happen if you put the wrong fuel, correct?
Very bad things can happen. There have been some incidents over time where jet fuel has been accidentally placed into a piston engine, and that can destroy the engine, hence destroy the aircraft. Misfueling is something that you try to protect yourself from double, triple checking that the correct fuel was put in there.
If you go to a self-serve station at the airport, then it's on you 100% responsibility to make sure that you are using the proper gas for your particular aircraft. But there are full service stations where they can take the airplane to fuel.
Wait a minute. You can get full service fuel when you fuel up an airplane. That's not something we see in cars at all anymore, right?
Yeah, that's true. When you're driving, I think New Jersey in the US is the only state left where they force you to getting full service, where you have to go park and somebody else has to put the gas in your car. In an airplane, you don't have to put your own gas. You could request full service.
Many airports have both available. And so you have the choice between full service, which can mean either pulling up to the same tank and having the personnel do the fueling procedure for you, or they will have a fuel truck that will pull up to where your aircraft is parked and do the fueling. And so that's surprising to a lot of people that you have the option of full service. Now, it usually costs more than the self-service that were also available at the airport. So people just pick and choose, depending on their situation.
Some people are just not comfortable doing the self-serve, or maybe they don't want to do it. Maybe they have business clothes on. However, if you do have full service or somebody else fueling, the responsibility is still on you to make sure the proper fuel goes on. I just read about a case where they put a wrong fuel in. Unfortunately, the plane was in an accident because of that.
There have been misfueling through both methods of fueling, whether it's a jet in a piston engine or 100 low lead in a turbine engine, which I have also read about that happening in very rare cases.
Gas station, the gas is clearly marked. Regular gas, mid range, premium, with even a diesel pump in an airport. How do you distinguish that? Are there markings similar to that?
There are several choices of gas sometimes available, and so choosing the right one will involve clear labels, whether it's full serve or self serve. Sometimes the tanks can look almost exactly like the same kind of pumps and hoses. And so another protection there is that the fuels come in different colors.
How do you take advantage of the colors? How do you check that?
There are places around the aircraft where you can take a little sample of fuel with a special tool in a cup and take a look at it to make sure, okay, is that fuel blue? And the other thing you're doing when you're sampling is making sure you don't have excess amounts of dirt or water in that fuel, because it will be very visible in the fuel if you have that coming out of the tank.
I don't do that when I get gas in a car.
No, there's not really an easy way to do that. This kind of sampling is actually done before you even start the engine up, when you're for the first flight of the day and possibly afterwards, because any water contaminants may take a long time to work their way into where you can detect that. You do want to make sure that you're going to a place that's got good quality tanks, is reputable. There, I have not heard of any problems of contaminated fuel straight out of a good tank. And so the water and dirt that can get in is usually from the previous flight, from sitting overnight, maybe in the rain, from condensation in the tanks.
If you by accident got the wrong one, you need to bleed the whole thing, make sure the mechanic takes a look at it, because it's not good. Same thing in the car, right? You do not want to put diesel in a gas car or vice versa. Bad things can happen, but the bad things get even more magnified when you're in an airplane, because when you're 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 feet up, when something happens, you can't just pull over. That's not going to be a pretty day.
Making sure you've got the right fuel, that it's not contaminated, and that, oh, by the way, you have the right quantity of fuel when you are at the pump fueling up. All of that is so important for safety.
I always fill my airplane tanks. I don't see why I would want to fly with less gas. The only reason, maybe if I have to carry extra weight and therefore I don't have enough weight to carry the fuel, so I might take a little less fuel. But I don't want to be somebody who flew the airplane without enough fuel.
It is one of the more common causes of engine failure in small general aviation aircraft, is either fuel starvation, where you literally run out of fuel. Unlike your cars, a lot of aircraft cannot run on that little bit of 1 to 2 gallons left in the tank. You have got to have healthy reserves to keep those engines running fully. But fuel starvation has happened to people, as well as what we call fuel exhaustion, where the aircraft system cannot get to fuel that is in the aircraft, because you have to maybe switch to a different fuel tank via a special mechanism, or there is a problem in the fuel system and it can't access the fuel that's actually there. And so there have been mishaps due to fuel management or a mechanical issue.
Unlike a car, airplanes usually they have more than one fuel tank.
Well, typical these days, they have two, one in each wing.
That means that part of your fuel management is not just making sure that you have a certain total amount of fuel, but you need to know how much fuel is on either tank.
You have two different kinds of fuel system in small aircraft. Usually the higher wings will have a very simple gravity fed system, because the gas tanks are at the top of the airplane. They're going to feed down into the engine. And so making sure there's the approximate same amount in each wing is pretty important. And then with the low wing equivalent to those aircraft, usually because you're actually sitting on the wing and the fuel tanks are maybe sometimes even below the level of the engine, they require working pumps to pump that fuel into the engine. And those usually require that you fly on one tank at a time.
You could run out of fuel on one tank because you forgot to switch, which you think you don't have fuel, but you do. You just didn't switch it to the proper tank.
And they can affect the handling characteristics. So that is something you have to be aware of, not just the quantity you're burning and what you have left, but where is that fuel coming from?
The freezing point of the gasoline matters a lot. So the jets that fly at 38, 39,000 feet, it's really, really cold there. So the gas that we use in our small little airplanes won't even work out there. And there are some really bad examples of crashes because the fuel wasn't getting there because it froze.
They have special fuels, special additives to prevent that from happening. And so it's definitely a whole different category once you get above, say, small airplane altitude limits of generally 15 to 20,000 feet. Most aircraft are still running on fossil fuels. A lot of piston aircraft are still running on fuels that have a little bit of lead, like 100 low lead. And for the past, I believe, 20 years, there's been a long, slow movement to eventually get rid of that. There are alternate fuels that are available on a really limited basis. That's called 100 UL, 100 octane unleaded fuel, which is going to be eventually a replacement for 100 low lead. But there's some complications with that due to the chemistry, due to retrofitting all of these piston engines out there to be compatible with this kind of fuel.
Most people keep their car for 10 years, 15 years, and then they upgrade or buy a different car. So when technology changes, the newer cars automatically have this newer technology. Unfortunately, in aviation, we have airplanes that are 60, 70 years old and flying and just fine. And so you might think, what's a big deal? Why can't we go from leaded gasoline to unleaded? Why can't we just put catalytic converters like there are in the cars? But now you're talking very expensive regulatory hurdles, safety hurdles, all kinds of different changes.
That's why it's so complicated. Ages of aircraft fuel systems, along with engines, which most of them have gone through engine changes in the time of the airframe. But still, these are old technology. These are piston aircraft engines with technology that's decades old to not only keep the engine going for a long term for years and years and years, but also to help the combustion process. And so there is a chemical containing lead still put into that 100 low lead. Why is there still lead? And that's why.
Biofuels are starting to come up, or at least in the research stage for aviation. There are hydrogen fuel, like fuel cells, that are in experimental stages in some airplanes, and also electric airplanes. In our Oshkosh episode that we talked about a couple of companies that have been doing electric airplanes.
It's really interesting how the technology is going to evolve in so many different aspects in this effort to get rid of lead in aviation fuel. Electric training aircraft and electric air taxis are already starting to happen, and that is one solution to getting fuel and especially leaded fuel out of the equation. I have yet to fly an electric aircraft. How about you? I'm hoping to get a ride sometime soon.
I only see it in air shows. Drones and like quadcopters are probably likely to come in with some electric component where you can fly.
When drones get bigger, big enough to carry people and they can run on electrical power, that is something that is coming down the line with battery technology.
If you don't want fossil fuel and you're not ready for electric vehicle, there is another choice, right?
No fuel.
No fuel. Yeah, go fly a glider with no fuel. You don't need anything. You just need thermals.
That's great to be able to take that out of the equation. So not only do you have the lack of a propeller, lack of an engine, you don't have to worry about all of the fuel issues that we deal with refueling, picking the right kind of fuel, testing it for contamination, and that's definitely a consideration. Gliders. Did you know that there are that many types of fuel available in aviation aircraft? Did we miss some? Tell us in the comments.